In the previous episode, after overcoming some challenging terrain, I invited you to explore Chatura with me. A rather unique place on Georgia's map. On the drive you're watching now, I also created a 3D video. By filming, I ran into some issues with the gimbal due to settings not optimized for this type of shot. As you can see, I'm checking why it keeps stubbornly holding the previously set direction instead of smoothly following the car's movement. Live and learn, right? Nevertheless, you can see the result of this operation in episode 3 of the Immersive Georgia series. For more about Chatura, check out episode 4 of the main series. Here, however, I want to show you one more extraordinary spot in this city, the Mgwimewi Monastery. This rock-carved monastery is located on the eastern edge of Chatura. Its entrance is a horizontally hewn tunnel that leads into a cave housing a basilica and other sacred sites. It was established in the second half of the 13th century, and its name comes from the Georgian word for cave. The complex includes the Saviour's Basilica, a small hall church, a bell tower, and a nunnery. Behind the main church is the Mgwimewi Cave, where services are held on major feast days. Interesting is the small hall church, whose ceiling and west wall are formed by natural rock. The east wall features a bas-relief of a ram, while the exterior south wall displays a fresco painting. As the monastery remains functional, visitors are asked to respect the dress code. I highly recommend visiting this site, not just for those seeking to connect with Georgia's ancient spirituality, but also because the Mgwimewi Monastery is truly one of the country's most unique landmarks. I set off again shortly after 4:30 p.m. I was heading towards the Georgian Military Road. Since this region of Georgia is an area where in the northeast we have one of two separatist republics that you can't enter, getting to the Georgian Military Road doesn't leave many options. On road number 22, you have to get to expressway number 1 and head east towards Gori and then Tbilisi. However, before I could really get going, after less than 20 minutes, I was stopped by the police. I admit that to my great surprise, because when I entered the town of Shacher, I slowed down significantly, looking around for a place where I could inflate the tires to the pressure intended for driving on asphalt. There was therefore no question of exceeding the speed limit, and I had absolutely no idea what the gentleman could want.
Hello. Numer. Polska. Problem. Tam nie ma miejsca. Maszyny. Drive passport. License. Drive license.
As you saw, the police officer pointed to my license plate. At first, I thought he was referring to where I'm from, but the word problem didn't quite fit. After another gesture, I realized he didn't like the way my license plate was mounted. Following his request, I prepared my documents, shook my head at his question about speaking Russian, and waited to see what would happen, keeping a close eye on the second officer who was scanning the front of my vehicle. While reaching into my bag for my wallet to get my insurance papers, my camera tipped over, and I wondered if filming the interaction would become an issue. However, either they didn't notice or didn't care, so I continued recording without interruption. The first officer took my documents to the patrol car while the second pointed to the bumper as the place where the license plates should be mounted.
I can see cars without front at all in here. Without.
Why here?
I have no place in front. It is allowed in Poland.
In Poland, the law states that if a vehicle doesn't have a designated place for mounting the license plate, it should be placed in the center of the vehicle's width.
I pass the cars without the whole front bumpers and there's no problem. Why here?
There's no requirement to mount it on the bumper. That's why I have it on the windshield. It's clearly visible there, and I don't risk tearing it off while driving off-road or covering it with mud, making it unreadable. However, the officer decided to explain that things work differently here. He used Google Translate on his phone to bypass the language barrier. Naturally, I couldn't just agree with his arguments and had to explain my own reasoning, so a back and forth play over the translation app began. While I was typing, the officer continued examining my front bumper looking for a spot to mount the plate. For context, my vehicle's front end makes the windshield the only reasonable option. Mounting the plate on the grille would block airflow to the radiators. I was writing my argument and the officer kept inspecting my bumper. My first attempt to present my arguments. Failure.
Excuse me.
So I patiently waited for him to return.
I can see cars without the whole front bumpers here, and I have a problem because I have a license plate installed on top, not on the bumper. That's just ridiculous.
When he did, I presented my reasoning. Given the road conditions here, vehicles driving around without front bumpers, and the general chaos, I didn't understand why they were slinging me out. Judging by the expression on his face, he didn't like my explanations. So he used heavier weapon.
Insurance you have?
Insurance.
But this is my insurance.
Can you please?
I handed over my insurance documents again, but no, it was the wrong one.
Georgian insurance.
This is for Georgia as well.
This is Georgian.
This is for Georgia.
Insurance for Georgia must be Georgian, purchased in Georgia. I tried to find the relevant coverage information on my international insurance document, which took a moment. Meanwhile, the officer was busy writing another message for me.
International motor insurance card.
Georgian insurance you have?
No.
Georgian? No.
After he firmly spelled out that I need Georgian insurance, I gave up and waited for the next step, albeit with a touch of sarcasm.
Georgia is not friendly anymore for Polish people, I think.
What?
Georgia is not friendly anymore for us, for visitors, for guests. I don't understand what is the problem.
Oh.
Here's an interesting fact. Did you know that in Georgia, local vehicle owners are not required to have liability insurance? However, foreign registered vehicles driving in Georgia have been required to have insurance since March 1st, 2018. So, Georgian drivers, who are often a major road hazard, aren't obliged to have insurance, but foreign drivers are. This means that if I were involved in an accident that wasn't my fault, I would still end up paying for the damages because I'm required to have insurance, but the at-fault driver isn't. What a nonsense!
Very good.
We exchanged a few more opinions. I brought up the dangers caused by other drivers. The officer insisted there were no hazards on Georgian roads. His final statement, however, left me amused.
You understand? No dangers. No.
Oh yeah, the drivers passing, just doing crazy things. I'm driving like, you know. Okay. Whatever. It is not allowed to attach driving license at this. And this is the country of law. They obey law here, he's saying. This is just ridiculous.
Just a quick reminder. This is what a country where road laws are enforced look like. And these are just a few clips from my time here so far. There have been plenty more. I won't bore you by showing the entire situation. I ended up stuck there for over 20 minutes, long enough for my camera to start insist for some juice. So after a few clean cuts in the editing process, let's fast forward. I'm wondering what's really at stake here, whether this is just about squeezing some cash out of me or if everything will proceed by the book. I take a moment to text my friend, letting her know what's going on and decide to check how much cash I have on me, just in case it might come in handy. And so, I wait for the officers to return with their verdict.
How much?
Your passport? Passport machine? Driver license?
After accepting a fine of 100 Georgian lari, reading instructions how to pay, to be honest, I thought I would be able to do it right away.
Okay, can I pay now?
Not here, not here. In bank. In
With this?
bank.
Policeman saluted goodbye,
Okay.
even twice, and I was finally able to continue my journey. Considering the difficulties that I encountered on the trail to Chatura, which I showed in episode 4, you have to admit that this day was full of an exceptional number of attractions. I drove literally a few hundred meters, and at the car wash on the left side, I saw a compressor, so I decided to pull over and inflate the tires, because I was still driving at off-road pressure. I was looking for a place with a compressor because to inflate all 4 tires to a pressure of around 3 bars, my compressors would have to work for several minutes. I was not convinced about the safety of the makeshift solution I had made regarding the fuse, so I preferred to keep the system functional in case I had no other option and use an external solution this time. I have to admit that I had no idea that in Georgia, compressors at gas stations are not standard like in European countries. In fact, they simply do not exist there. So you have to look for such stations either at tire shops or car washes, like this one. In each case, using the compressor is subject to a fee. As I pulled over to inflate my tires, I couldn't help but notice I had become quite a spectacle for a group of locals. What seemed to be an ordinary day for them had taken a slight detour as my vehicle captured their curiosity. They gathered at the front of my car, examining every detail, the code, the kinetic recovery rope, the winch, and engaging in animated discussions about it all. Meanwhile, I stayed in my own little bubble of calm, focused on the steady rhythm of inflating my tires, letting their interest play out as part of the charm of the moment. After a while, their initial curiosity gave way to quiet observation. They stood at the front of the car, occasionally shifting positions to get a better view or perhaps to inspect another detail that had caught their attention. This went on for a few more minutes, a slow and deliberate study of the vehicle that seemed to fascinate them. Eventually, as if deciding their examination was complete, they stepped aside, clearing the way for me to continue my journey. It It was a small but endearing moment, a reminder of how something routine for me could become a point of interest and connection in someone else's day. The rest of the road was smooth asphalt and no more surprises. I knew I had to find a place to spend the night before I reached the motorway, because it would be hard to find a quiet spot later. It was just after 5 p.m, so early for me to be getting ready for the night, but on the other hand, it was too far to the Georgian military road for me to want to continue. As you know, I'm not a fan of looking for a place to sleep in the dark, although unfortunately I do it very often. So I focused on finding something right away, and after about 40 kilometers and a few distance in search of a suitable spot, I finally spotted something that seemed suitable. And so it was 7 p.m. Remember, dirt tracks doesn't mean you need to stay dirty. Upon waking, I heard some rustling in the bushes on the other side of the stream. When I stepped out of the car, I noticed movement in the undergrowth. The animals' coloring blended seamlessly with the deep interplay of the light and shadow created, leading me to think they were wild boars. But soon, I realized they were simply pigs. A whole lot of pigs, with a whole lot of piglets. Some of the little ones dashed around as if chasing each other, while others latched onto their mother's teats for a quick drink of milk. Some were playing together, while others poked their curious snouts into the forest floor, likely searching for threats. Still, others climbed over one another, joyfully causing a commotion. The mothers rummaged through the undergrowth, foraging for morsels while remaining ever watchful, their vigilance unbroken. The energy of the piglets seemed to spark in the air, an unstoppable force of vitality. And then there were boars, sprawled out on the ground, rooting with the snouts, perhaps savoring the coolness of the soil beneath them. I was struck by how much their dynamics mirrored our own. Mothers tirelessly tending to their young, while the fathers savoring whatever brief respite they could find. It was a charming snapshot of nature, almost human in its familiarity. And everything happened in such a charming corner among a green carpet of dense trees covering the surrounding hills that, to me, from above, resembled broccoli. Behind these hills lies South Ossetia, a separatist region that would like to join Russia. After spending the morning watching wild animals, I was already on the road just before 9 a.m. In half an hour, I had covered less than 30 kilometers, and in the vicinity of Agara, or more precisely in the village of Satsversi, I came across a beautiful castle, which was close to visitors and looked inhabited. The information I found indicates that the structure dates back to the feudal era. The exact time of its construction and its original owner are unknown, but archaeological discoveries suggest that its origins likely take back to the 6th to 8th centuries. It is certain, however, that a large tower stood here earlier, built in the early Middle Ages. Zami Valley was owned by the Cecesfili family. Therefore, it is presumed that the castle belonged to their ancestors, who settled here in the 15th century. The castle hall complex includes a large tower, a hall church, a defensive wall, a 3-story palace, and the remnants of other buildings. The site has 2 courtyards. The layout of the castle forms an elongated polygon covering an area of about 2,000 square meters. The large tower, built from cut stone and standing as a unique example of a Georgian fortification architecture, has walls that are an impressive 2 to 2.5 meters thick. The defensive wall, dating back to the 15th, 17th centuries, and the palace, along with the other buildings from the final phases of construction, were also constructed using cut stone. Situated on a hill at the confluence of 2 rivers, the castle's location vividly illustrates its strategic importance in past centuries. Its construction reflects traditional Georgian fortification techniques, featuring solid stone walls and towers designed to withstand sieges. Today, the castle grounds house a church, and the castle buildings are most likely inhabited by clergy, which likely explains the lack of access for visitors. After a brief stop at the fortress, I continue my journey. Passing through Agara, exactly 9 kilometers later, I merge onto the E60 highway heading east towards the Georgian military road. Ahead of me are 2 significant highlights of Georgia's must-see: the city of Gori and the rock-hewn town of Uplitsikhe. I intentionally skip both since I visited them in 2015. Besides, this time my goal is to spend most of my journey away from urban attractions, so I won't be stopping there. Nevertheless, let me take you on a brief detour to those places, so you can decide for yourself whether they're worth a visit. The first city I pass is Gori. Gori boasts 2 main attractions. The oldest part of the city, on a rocky hill, stands an ancient fortress. At the base of the ruins, you'll find statues of 8 great soldiers standing in a circle, which originally surrounded the tomb of the unknown soldier Tbilisi. Although the fortress was heavily damaged in the 1920 earthquake, it still offers stunning panoramic views of the city and its surroundings. When we admired the view back then, the local guards were more interested in Zara, our dog at that time, who won them over with her charm. The second attraction is what Gori is perhaps most famous for. It is the birthplace of one of the world's greatest tyrants, Joseph Stalin. Here you'll find a monumental museum dedicated to him, showcasing numerous artifacts and exhibits related to his life. Among its features are the reconstructed house where Georgian dictator was born and the historic armored railway carriage that Stalin used for his travels. The second place that I think you must visit is the rock-hewn city of Uplitsikhe. Identified as one of the oldest urban settlements in Georgia, strategically located in the center of the ancient kingdom of Kartli, it functioned as an important political and religious center. The buildings, dated back to the 5th century BC to the late Middle Ages, are a mix of unique cultural styles of Anatolia and Iran, as well as pagan and Christian architecture. It is definitely worth walking through its stone streets and transporting your imagination to those ancient times. After this short trip back in time, we return to the present. After about 100 kilometers, I reach the exit onto the Georgian military road marked as E117. It connects Tbilisi with Vladikavkaz in North Ossetia. Its beginning is definitely less picturesque than the section starting around the town of Gudari, which is almost 70 kilometers away, so I try to simply get through it as quickly as possible, which is not easy due to the huge number of trucks crawling up the hill. In addition, other drivers generally overtake wherever they can, not necessarily wherever they should, so you have to be very careful and watch the traffic in your mirrors closely. After a while, I also began to understand that overtaking whenever you can is the only option to overtake anything, especially if you don't have the right amount of power. However, I still felt uneasy when I had a police car behind me with its emergency lights on for a long time, and it was only after it had overtaken me, of course also on a solid line, and with a rather small margin in front, that I attempted to overtake too. But it is not easy in such heavy overland vehicle uphill. You have to admit that overtaking like this one the driver of this truck demonstrated poses a great risk to oncoming traffic. The rock wall on the left doesn't leave much room to escape, and two trucks next to each other make another wall. In addition, it seems that the continuous line means that there is no adequate visibility to cross the roadway, but local drivers don't care about such markings and overtake like crazy. At least this section of the road is quite wide, so I felt a bit safer because of it. You have to manage somehow. My first stop of the day is the fortress of Ananuri, one of the most picturesque and well-preserved historical sites in Georgia. Located just 70 kilometers from Tbilisi, it is also a highly touristic spot. The landscape around the fortress exudes tranquility. The serene surroundings of the Zimlyavi Reservoir, the Aragvi River Valley and the mountain peaks create an idyllic setting that is conducive to contemplation and relaxation. The Ananuri Castle complex, much like the ruins in Gori, is a fortress from the feudal era. It is situated in the Dusheti district at the head of the Zimlyavi Reservoir, 900 meters above sea level. The complex includes the upper and lower castles, defensive walls, towers, the Church of the Mother of God, the Church of the Holy Savior, the Church of the Healer, a bell tower, an octagonal prison cell, and water reservoirs. In the past, this place was the main strategic point of the Aragvi-Serestievo, where major roads from the north converged through the Teregi-Aragvi valleys as well as routes from the central Kartli region via Dusheti. Approaching the fortress from the south, you cross an impressive road viaduct spanning the Aragvi River Valley, connecting two steep slopes that rise several dozen meters above the ground. This viaduct allowed the road to bypass the steeper part of the valley, making travel much easier, particularly during the winter season. The earliest structure in the complex is the Chesuvia Tower, located at the center of the upper castle, dating back to the 14th century. The upper citadel was constructed in the 16th to 17th centuries, while the lower citadel was added later, in the 18th century. Important information about the main building, the Church of the Mother of God, is provided by an extensive inscription on the left side of its southern facade. According to the text, the church was built in 1689, commissioned by... Don't ask me to read it, please. The Church of the Holy Savior, located in the western part of the upper castle, was built at the end of the 16th or the first half of the 17th century. In 1743, King Teimuraz II abolished the Serestievo and placed Ananuri under king's control, turning it into the residence of royal officials. In 1786, Dagestani Khan Omar pillaged the Ananuri area. Historical records described it at the time as a small town inhabited by about 100 families. In a decree written by King Erkul II for his son in 1791, Ananuri Castle is listed among the 7 strongest fortresses in the kingdom. Looking at the surrounding shores from above, it's almost surprising that they aren't crowded. Sandy beaches and turquoise water invite you to relax. However, with plans to reach the Truso Valley that day, I only made a brief stop here, leaving richer with the images etched to my memory before continuing my journey. For the next 45 kilometers from the Ananuri fortress, the road runs mainly along the bottom of the valley carved by the Aragvi River. Over this stretch, it climbs gently from 840 meters above sea level at the fortress to the 1550 meters when reaching the serpentines near the town of Zemomleta. On the left side of the river, the Kazbegi National Park begins, and the nearest peak rises to 2,330 meters. Its slope is almost a kilometer long and is cut by numerous scars in the forms of gullies, illustrating the constant work of nature, which in silence and with determination transforms the raw rock material into an ever-evolving geological masterpiece. The 5 switchbacks in this area, featuring 4 sharp turns, elevate us over 300 meters. Considering that each straight section is approximately 600 to 800 meters, it is quite a steep climb. The top is the cross viewpoint, which offers views just like those you saw earlier, and we are now looking north, precisely in the direction I'm heading. The next section runs through more serpentines, less spectacular, but again taking us another 200 meters higher. The town we pass through is Gudari, one of the best ski resorts in Georgia, offering over 57 kilometers of ski slopes. If you would like to experience this section more fully, I invite you to a virtual ride in episode 3 of the Immersive Georgia series. Be sure to wear VR goggles. You can get right up to the Georgian-Soviet Friendship Monument standing on the rock slider of the Prowler. There, I also tell a bit of history about the road itself. After Gudari, the mountain landscape becomes more spectacular. A momentary break in oncoming traffic causes several cars to overtake me. If it weren't for the fact that I have a gimbal outside my window and I'm about to turn left, I would also overtake the Grump in front of me, who was not only driving mercilessly slow, but also signaling his intentions incorrectly. This parking lot is paid. It's not really clear who it belongs to and what area it covers, but people stand at the entrance and collect a fee when you leave. It could just as well be some private initiative because there is no official information about payment. And definitely, since they are already charging a fee, they could take care of the surface. The viewing platform, erected at the edge of the cliff, built by the Soviet architect Georgy Chakava and the artist-designer Nodar Malazonia in 1983, is a monument to Georgian-Russian friendship and is decorated with a colorful mosaic of 1,217 tiles. It is worth stopping by not for itself, but for the beautiful view of the Devil's Valley, the birthplace of the Russian Aragvi River. If you value a bit of peace, like I do, then a few dozen meters away stretches a vast plateau, where the tourist hustle and bustle quiets down and you can calmly contemplate the beauty of the surrounding nature. And there is much to contemplate. From this vantage point, you can see the Cross Pass, altitude 2,379 meters, located on the main watershed ridge of the Greater Caucasus. The pass marks a geographical divide. Rivers flow south, Aragvi, or north, the Terek River. This spot is popular with tourists for good reason. It's easily accessible, close to major urban centers, and blessed with remarkable scenery. The monument was renamed to Peace Monument in recent years, as the term Georgian-Russian friendship now feels like a bit of a joke. However, it was constructed to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the treaty between Georgia and Russia. Intended to protect Kartli from the Persian Empire, the argument ultimately brought Georgia into the fold of the Russian Empire. For those with 4x4 vehicles, you can venture to the edge of the plateau for an even more immersive experience of the rugged, majestic Caucasus landscape. To the south, the terrain softens into rolling ridges blanked with alpine grasses and flowers in summer, while winter transforms them into endless expanses of snow, inviting skiers and snowboarders to play. Even here, reaching the cliff edge comes with minor terrain challenges. Nothing extreme, but a welcome break from the monotony of paved roads. However, don't get too carried away. Ensure your brakes are in top shape. The trail ends abruptly at the sheer cliff several hundred meters high. There's no room for mistakes here. I love this type of perspective. Every time I capture it, It only reinforces my belief that we are insignificant compared to the majesty of nature. Looking north, you can immediately see that the view becomes more dramatic. Steep, rocky peaks rise there, cutting the sky with sharp edges. Somewhere behind, seemingly hidden but still dominating, Kazbek catches my attention. Although Kazbek itself, rising to 5,047 meters above sea level, is not located directly next to the Jvari Pass, its mighty silhouette is visible in the distance in good weather and is one of the most recognizable places in the region. Driving north, we leave the pass and enter the Terek River Valley. The tunnels running along the road immediately catch our eye. The first one is U-shaped, the others are a little less carved. At first glance, they seem inactive and neglected, but their functionality becomes obvious if we imagine how easy this busy route can be blocked by a snow avalanche during the winter or spring months. In 2015, I decided to check what the inside looks like, and I covered this section driving inside it. You have to admit that views outside are definitely more captivating. From the Jvari Pass to the turn onto the road leading to Truso Valley, we have almost exactly 8 kilometers. It might seem that we have gone down low, but this is an illusion. We are still at an altitude exceeding 2,000 meters above sea level. This section, beside few more serpentines, doesn't provide any surprises. The traffic is definitely moderate, so the only thing I can do is focus on admiring the Caucasian nature. Approaching the town of Kobi, I pass under the new cable car leading to Gudari. In total, it's a system of 4 connected lines with a total length of 9.5 kilometers, which take 30 to 60 minutes to ride one way. The main purpose is of course tourism, but the solution also serves as a backup for transporting goods when the Jvari Pass is close to cars. Finally, I found myself on the last straight stretch before reaching the place I'd been eager to visit but had never been to before. A place brimming with greenery, with the distinct scent of sulfur in the air. A destination that until recently was difficult to access without a 4x4 vehicle, and even now reaching some areas with a regular car is impossible. For the less adventurous, there is a small parking lot by the bridge in the deserted village of Kvemo Okrukana, where the trail leading to the Truso Valley begins. The road winds through a narrow, deep canyon carved by the raging Terek River, surrounded by the landscape full of drama and untamed beauty. Steep rock walls, often scarred with gullies and crevices, rise on both sides of the river, forming a monumental corridor in the heart of the mountains. The Terek River, renewed for its power and torrential flow, twists its way along the canyon floor, carrying glacial waters from the Greater Caucasus towards Russia. The path I was taking could technically be driven by a regular car, and some people did, saving themselves about 3 kilometers of walking to the point where the valley opens up and another small parking area can be found. However, driving along such a road requires significant caution, and it seems like this isn't the place for those who aren't confident behind the wheel. As you can see, there aren't many spots to pass another vehicle, so in the event of a standoff, one of the drivers has to reverse to the nearest passing point. As I was about to find out, not everyone approaches this kind of drive with the same level of care. When the Ford, coming from the opposite direction, moved forward after initially stopping, I was a bit surprised. I thought perhaps we could squeeze by and tried moving as far right as possible, but with a nearly vertical rock wall on my side, there was no way I could pull off the road farther. The driver got out and asked if there had been a passing spot earlier.
Yeah, Frank. You have
I explained that there hadn't been one for quite some distance and that they need to back up. He didn't seem entirely convinced and walked ahead to check for himself. Quickly realizing I was right, he still seemed reluctant to reverse.
try a bit to the side, but
I made one last attempt to clear the way, carefully trying to climb part of the slope on my right while avoiding tipping my vehicle over. But it was no use. There simply wasn't enough room, and the other driver eventually had to go convince the second vehicle behind them to back up. I admit that I was surprised by this whole action. In the past, such scenarios resolve themselves almost naturally. Usually, both sides try to find a solution rather than once just standing there waiting to see what the other will do. What made this even more surprising was that these drivers had just started a trail. It was much easier and closer for them to return to the canyon's entrance by reversing downhill rather than expecting me to reverse hundreds of meters to a passing point uphill. Eventually, as you can see, they started reversing, but it was clear from the beginning that there was a lot of resistance. Within minutes, I understood why. The Mercedes driver had absolutely no clue how to reverse properly. I got the impression that if it weren't for his passenger who got out to guide him, the entire maneuver would have been impossible. I speed up the footage here 10 times faster, so you could see just how bad things can get. The reversing alone took over 5 minutes. Watching what was unfolding, I moved to a slightly wider section of the trail and parked as close to the edge as possible to give them room to pass. Now, take a look. Just a few dozen meters ahead, the actual trail was only beginning. Yet, there we were, risking disaster because one driver lacked both skills and imagination. The roadside seems stable enough, but you never really know. Saying I felt uncomfortable in that moment would be an understatement. I was forced to hug the left side of the trail despite believing I had already left them plenty of space. As you can see, forward driving wasn't exactly the Mercedes driver's strong suit either. Watching him struggle left me stunned, annoyed and baffled that someone so unprepared would venture onto such a trail where clumsy maneuvers could easily end in tragedy. And below me, the Terek River rode furiously. Even with 2 people guiding the Mercedes, it was painfully slow. From my perspective, he still had at least 30 centimeters of clearance on his left side, but what do I know? Once I had enough space to safely return to the trail, I didn't wait a second longer. I wasn't going to spend another minute in that spot. This incident is a prime example of why I believe the expansion of tourism into such remote areas isn't always a good thing. Beyond the overcrowding of once wild places, you also get people arriving who are entirely unprepared for the challenges these locations present, putting themselves and others at risk. But once again, I made it. And there it was, the breathtaking Trusa Valley stretching out before me. But more adventures await in the upcoming episodes. So stay tuned.